Hey. Hey guys, thanks for joining. We're just giving it a couple of minutes so everyone can join.
Paddy's weekend, yeah, I imagine.
Okay.
Very nice.
How is Wednesday morning before the Paddy's weekend? This is
It starts Wednesday afternoon, doesn't it?
Does it already start Wednesday afternoon, really?
I mean,
oh, wow.
We'll see.
Rainy, okay. Guys, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know where you're calling in from. This is supposed to be a very lively, interactive chat.
And if you have questions you want answered or just ask the group, please do so. Yes. Last weekend with a rugby win. Yeah. How does anything get done in Ireland anyway?
I don't want to talk about the rugby. We'll leave that for another time. If anyone's from France, congratulations.
Did they win? They won.
France, yeah, it was less a game of rugby, more a game of cricket. The score that they put past us. It was pretty embarrassing.
Okay, that's sad.
Hey everyone, great to see you joining. Thanks for joining. Yeah, so please feel free. The Q&A box is open. If you came here with specific questions that you already know we want us to touch on, please share it. And yeah, let us know in the chat where you're calling in from. Let's mingle. This is supposed to be a nice.
I even saw somebody from Lebanon. That's cool.
Interactive chat.
Maybe next time we should give a prize, most exotic location.
Keep in mind, we have a host from Rio.
that is exotic.
Yeah, I guess it's
I guess it's in the eye of the beholder,
huh? Antarctica. Well, anybody can do Antarctica, I think they would win categorically.
Yeah, I think so too. Absolutely. Yeah, I can't say Utrecht is very exotic, so it's nice, but well, the sun is out now, so that's good.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining, guys. I see a lot of people heading in. We are just giving it a couple minutes, but I guess we can start because we have lots to cover today. So, hey everyone, great to see you here. We have our amazing speakers here, Harm and Nick. I'll let them introduce themselves in a minute. But while we're at it, as I said, please let any questions that you already have in the chat. Feel free to comment, interact while the speakers are answering questions. This is supposed to be super interactive. We want to answer the burning questions. So, okay. Most of you might not know me. I'm Hannah from 21 Analytics. I take care of everything content marketing and sections like this. If you are still not following me in 21, we would be happy to receive this invite on LinkedIn today. Now I'll give the floor to Nick Smart. He's the expert from our partners at Crystal Blockchain Analytics. Please introduce yourself, Nick.
Thanks, Hannah. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nick Smart. I'm Director of Blockchain Intelligence and Data for Crystal Blockchain. We're a blockchain intelligence company that helps out with transaction monitoring. And my team's responsibility is to try and make sense of what's going on the blockchain. So we label things on the blockchain to help you deal with the various risks. My background and experience, I spent most of my time as a professional intelligence analyst, coming up on 19 years now, total in analysis, a bit of background in information security, and also a bit of exposure to cryptocurrency towards more recent times. I'll pass back to Hannah or on to Harm.
Yeah, let me pick this up. I'm Harm. I'm co-founder of 21 Analytics. I'm not responsible. I don't even know what I'm responsible for. I usually do these kind of things: outreach, talking, explaining what we're doing. We are a travel rule software provider. That means that you can license our software, run it, and then you're compliant with the travel rule, undoubtedly known to everybody. We take this, we do this from a very specific viewpoint. We think data security is very important. You're handling PII data, so that's of utmost importance. So that's reflected in the software we're doing. We also, next to travel rule compliance, we also have self-hosted, unhosted wallet verification in various forms and shapes, and we try to make sure that our clients are all compatible with all that stuff. I go back a long time in crypto. I bought Bitcoin at 3 cents, sold it for 30 cents. I was very happy at that time. Now maybe less so. But that goes to show a little bit how long I've been doing. I've been an engineer by heart and doing various companies since. I'm happy to chat. Also on LinkedIn, reach out, please. Everybody welcome. Also our competitors.
Welcome everyone, every VASP bank, everyone. Great to have you here, guys. Maybe to start with, let's go over the first things first, and then I'll ask this to Nick. But Harm, as always, please feel free to add your comments. To start with, I would like to ask, which are some types of self-hosted wallets? And how do you think people make the decision on where to store their assets? What is it that they're trying to solve when they rethink these custody decisions? And is the number of people going for self-hosted wallets really growing?
Okay. So I think, first of all, we probably do a bit of definitional stuff for what we're going to refer to as self-hosted wallets, because there is sometimes a bit of question marks about what constitutes it. Probably the easiest way of defining if something is self-hosted or self-custody or something like that is who controls the private key. That's really how I would describe self-hosted. If the individual user controls the private key, that allows them to release funds or sign transactions. As far as I'm concerned, that would constitute a self-hosted wallet. There are other variations of that where, perhaps the operator has some access to it. And in those cases, I feel that because they have the ability to control the spending of funds, it's not necessarily self-hosted. So some of the examples you might get are online wallets. So things like crypto.com has a wallet, blockchain.com has wallets. These might be examples of hosted or unhosted wallets, depending on who you go with. Other ones, mobile apps like Exodus, Trust Wallet, things you can download to your smartphone. And then there are physical tokens like your Ledger, your Trezor, your cold cards, for example, like physical things. And then right at the very end, we get to things like paper wallets. Like, so someone has a printed out copy of their wallet and their private keys and so on and so forth. But what's important to know is that, and it's a phrase that gets repeated frequently in crypto, is if you control the keys. So if you don't control the keys, it's not your crypto. Like there's not your keys, not your crypto is the adage that everyone says. And it's true. If you don't have the ability to make a transaction without involving an intermediary, then you are not self-custodial. I think speaking to like the rise in why people might look at self-custody now, it comes down to, do we trust the exchanges in this to act responsibly with our money? And there are some pretty big recent cases to talk about. Anyone who's been in crypto for more than 20 minutes knows about FTX and all the drama that's happened with them and people being unable to recover cryptocurrency that's hosted by them and be unable to make withdrawals from them as an exchange. It is a real problem. But they didn't have self-custody, it was hosted. So people are looking more to bring the control into themselves, to take charge of, what effectively is their money or their assets and have it into one place. Why that's rising is obviously the key thing, but it does lead to some other sort of like fairly interesting nuances, in terms of the risks that individuals are now exposing themselves to. Whereas if you have it on a hosted wallet, perhaps you get the protection of, an exchange with a security team, and strong firewalls and good access control rules and all the other good stuff that comes along with it. But as self-custody, you're now taking some charge and responsibility of that yourself, which can leave you perhaps more exposed to it. But the general trend and what we've seen in the data is that more people are now choosing to self-custody. And we think this is driven by the rise of decentralized finance, but also the failures of exchanges to reassure people, particularly after the wake of FTX. Just to throw a couple of big statistics out there, our team did some calculations, and the ratio of hosted to unhosted wallets balance just on Bitcoin is about 5 times more, which is pretty significant. Something like 2.8 million Bitcoin currently lives on hosted wallets. 16.5 million lives on unhosted wallets, and that's something we've seen steadily rise over time. Harm, I don't know if you have any sort of like follow on to why this might be happening.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would add is that people are getting more and more cognizant about what it means that you have a self-hosted wallet. So what kind of risks that entails. And I also think that it's a matter of slow education for everybody. So when you get into a Bitcoin space, same with me, right? I got into the Bitcoin space. Where do I keep my coins? I sent them to Mt. Gox. It's fun. You should try it. But you learn as you go that there's such a thing as a self-hosted wallet, and I think things as FTX are real catalysts to do that. Educational materials are so much better than back then. You don't need to play around with the Bitcoin Core to get your own wallet, as was the issue back then. It's so much easier nowadays. So also the ecosystem progressing makes it so much easier to do so. Also the Lightning wallets, I think, are going to be a big thing there. So yeah, it comes with the maturity of the network.
That's exactly our next question about how can VASPs and users take steps to improve their education, awareness around the benefits and risks of self-hosted wallets, and how can VASPs promote best practice for managing private keys and other security measures. I think that's what you were going into.
Yeah, I think I think VASP are by and large taking responsibility there in general. They are telling there's a great educational material from VASPs out there. And that makes sense. I think if you want to be a serious player in this space, you want your users to be aware that this is how it works. But also players like Crystal, right? They show what you can actually do with it. It's a completely different cryptocurrencies are a completely different thing than traditional finance. It's very transparent. It's very, very open. Crystal can go in and see all this stuff happening. And that's nice for a user too. They become aware that of how this technology actually works, and that they now finally can take control. Much more options in the market. In case of hardware wallets, you can build them yourself nowadays, or put them on a piece of paper, like Nick mentioned. And I think most of the players in the market are taking an active role in this, and it makes sense, right? I mean, creating content also works well with Google, so I think all the incentives are nicely aligned here.
Any
inputs,
Nick? Sorry, to stop you there. Any inputs, Nick?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, you made a really good point about Mt. Gox, and I said FTX and how people are driving towards this. Like, I think the key point here is that this isn't news. Like, FTX was a big issue, and there was a huge, alleged fraud taking place, and it has shocked many people. And I think the case is the most recent one, but you're right. This isn't the first time this has happened. We have Mt. Gox. People remember Quadriga CX in Canada. People lost their money there too.
Yeah.
Found whatever else. Like, this isn't a new thing in terms of whatever else. And I do agree that the accessibility of the technology is getting much easier. Like, it's getting to a stage now where, it's it's fairly straightforward to use. There is, of course, some work to be done on the user experience. I think there are some fairly significant consequences. For example, if you put an address in wrong for a payment, and I think that those challenges will be surmounted at some stage. But things are certainly, better than what they were. And pointing to exchanges and security, I'm also pleased to see that many places that require, many places are now asking for information security standards to be implemented for cryptocurrency businesses. You want to have an exchange, you want to run an OTC desk, you want to run a payment processor. There are now standards that you have to adhere to get a license and be regulated that relate to your ability to maintain the control of your customers' information, which is, it's important that happens. I point to, and it's more subjective, but the trend in, crime in cryptocurrency is the thefts tend to take place on decentralized protocols. Like we see a lot of cross-chain bridges being hacked, lots of, liquidity pools having issues or whatever else. Centralized exchange hacks, I'm not going to say they've died out completely because they certainly still happen, but they are a lot rarer than they used to be. And I think, again, it just shows maturity in the industry, but also some of the difficulty that, criminals have in obtaining the information to be successful. Like, if you have to protect the private key at all costs, there are so many ways to distribute that information and use multi-signature wallets and whatever else that make it very difficult for somebody to steal money from you. It certainly shows to a maturity on the exchange's part and a centralized, for sure.
Yeah, educating the user, right, and how to protect it.
Yeah, but also the education. All the exchanges can learn from each other, and they are. So it's also even educational higher level. There's so many more people knowing what they're doing at this point.
Great inputs, guys. Moving on a little bit more to the regulatory part. I guess everyone wants to hear a little bit about this. Last year, we saw a very controversial EU proposal for the regulation of transfers to self-hosted wallets.
Yeah.
In the travel rule package, the transfer of funds regulation. The initial plan would include small transactions requiring the collection and storage of ownership information, right? The approved regulation now being translated to then enter into force requires VASPs to collect proof of ownership for transactions above €1,000 if the customer of that VASP is the owner of the wallet. That's the regulation as is now. How do you see Harm this play out in practice?
Yeah, I'm glad they changed this. I think some exchanges will actually do this. So if you send €900 to your wallet, that's fine, and 1,100 you need to show proof of ownership. But I also think that I see slides. It makes the user interface a little bit harder, right? So now you need to confront your user with additional questions. I think, and especially since it's not everywhere the same, I think that that exchanges will err on the side of caution. And if you're wiring to a self-hosted wallet, they're going to require proof of ownership. That can go two ways. Either you go with the visual proof, the screenshots. That's somewhat labor intensive, or you go all the way to automatic message signing, which is super simple to do. It's super simple to do, and it's completely fraud proof. And I'm not even sure it's such a bad thing that you do that. It makes the life for a VASP much easier, and you're getting proof of ownership for a particular address for this already KYC user, because I also think that that's going to happen. Withdrawals and deposits are only going to be accepted by KYC users from you as a VASP. I think MiCA or TFR leaves some room to do enhanced due diligence, I think they call it, if you wire to third party. But frankly, I think that enhanced due diligence will boil down to onboarding this user to your platform and nothing else. It's nice that there's a way out. I think Mika did this right, but in practice, I don't think this is going to happen.
Yeah, I think the other thing I find interesting you said about like proof of ownership, and VASPs might choose to use a screenshot. I really find that challenging. I don't personally find that as proof of anything, frankly.
No,
because it's far too easy.
Pretty hilarious.
Yeah, it's too easy to fabricate. And you know, when we talk, when we're a company where we talk about conversations about what we're doing, you know, with data and labeling things, whatever else, we're always talking about like making sure there's proof. Like again, so if it ever comes to a point that, you know, we have to put this in front of someone to defend an action or to prosecute an individual, like we have something substantial that says this is the action that was taken and this is what led to that decision. You know, a screenshot might satisfy the regulation, but under scrutiny, I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah.
And
Fully
you know, the
agree.
whole point of the blockchain is that we have this, you know, this immutable thing that we can interact with, we can really lever and get more stuff out of. If we're not making use of that technology to its full potential, we're not really doing the industry a favor. And, you know, AOPP, I think, is your guys' product that you use. Like, It makes a lot of sense, you know, to have, you know, an automatic signing or transaction that gives you proof that that address is owned by somebody. You know, that's good enough. The argument could then flip on its head and you could say, well, how do you prove this address was owned by the person that's operating the account? Well, the reality with online banking, you have no way of proving that the person making the withdrawal is the person who controls the account. Like if I steal your password and username, I can go and log into your account and do stuff. But at least with this, we have, this was definitely sent to this address. And as far as I'm concerned, given the cryptographic, you know, proof around it, that's irrefutable. So if it ever comes out that that address was controlled by, you know, somebody who's been implicated in another criminal activity, you can't undo that. Like it's there. You can't pretend it was a mistake. It was your address, like it's linked to you. And I think, you know, many people fear the travel rule, but it can be like quite protective of a VASP. Like you can defend yourself a lot better under the sort of technology we have. But again, as you mentioned earlier about like our tool, we do have hyper visibility. Like this isn't precedented before. Like I think, you know, there have been many articles about large exchanges and their processing of payments to sanctioned or illegal entities. And the reality is the only reason we can generate that data is because of the blockchain, because we have a public transparent ledger and we can see where the money's come from and where it's been sent to. You can't do the same thing with a retail bank and check every single banknote that's been made or deposited anywhere. And that kind of hypervigilance means the industry gets cast in a certain light. But I think we're missing the opportunity here. We have the ability to see more about people who are abusing the system, and we can take action then. Like we have the ability to detect it and take action. So, you know, I think particularly for the travel regulation and everything else that comes along with it, it does look scary. Like you are going to see payments to people who are doing bad stuff, but at least you know that they're doing bad stuff. At least you can do something about it. Whereas before you have to rely on, you know, some sort of information being received from law enforcement at some point later on in time. Whereas here we can be a little bit more preemptive, a bit more real time. At least that's how I feel about it.
Perfect. Yeah, I think you said it very well about the UPP itself. So they did better than us. Great.
Better than a screenshot.
Okay. And that leaves us also, that last point that you brought up, I think it's important to talk a little bit about the limitations of blockchain analytics, how some players and some also regulators have a view that blockchain analytics can answer everything and it's black and white and it has all the answers to identify if there is a risk or yeah, if that address is from a scammer or whatever. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So it's not an anti-sales pitch, but I think it's important we understand the limitations of what we can do. So the first thing I'll say is that our map is always incomplete. The answer I gave you earlier about the statistics on Bitcoin, and I can show you Ethereum as well, which I think is a ratio of 15 times more unhosted wallets. Unhosted wallets, we tend not to know who owns them. Like, it's not a service provider. So the general way of understanding what blockchain analytics do is to talk about us like a map. So imagine a blank map. There are buildings, there are streets. The buildings are addresses, the streets are transactions linking the buildings. If there's an apartment block, I might know the name of the apartment block, but I don't know every single person behind every single door. I don't know the individual's information. And the limitation of blockchain analytics is we don't know the name of every single person and every single address that corresponds to them. We have an ongoing task to try and find out the name of the services, the hosted wallets, but individuals, the private users, we don't collect that information. Like, we don't have a remit to do that as a company, and we won't, because it's, you know, it's an abuse of privacy. That belongs to the VASP. They are the ones who know who sends the money. That's their customers. That's nothing to do with us. So the limitation is you do have this murky area where we know bigger areas of the blockchain, but the individuals we don't. So we have to rely on, you know, the heuristics around those addresses, who they've interacted with, to try and build up an idea and understanding who they are. The reality in other ways, though, is that when it comes to talking about blockchain analytics, the perception is we know everything, and we knew it all along, and we knew it before it happened. A lot of the ways in which we discover information about high-risk services is sometimes after the fact. Like, if a new .NET marketplace appears tomorrow and they start trading and we discover it on Saturday, that's a whole day's trading, transfers in and out of a .NET marketplace, which we wouldn't have been able to warn anybody about because we found out about it the day afterwards. And generally, as a company, we're quite fast. Like, we tend to find things relatively quickly, and I'm sure our competitors are the same. They find things quite fast, but it's still after the fact that you as a VASP, you've already been exposed to that problem. Like, you have to take action after the event. And I feel, you know, it's harsh on a VASP to say, well, look, you received all this payment from a drug marketplace. Okay, but we only knew about it after you told us, and you didn't find out about it until 2 days after the market had started. And that's not a fault of us. Like, we do our best to try and get there faster, and it's not the fault of the VASP, but it's what you do after that point, you know. And what this all leads to is transaction monitoring isn't everything. Like, we make a really great tool. I love it. Do you know what I mean? I'm also, of course, I'm going to say that our competitors are very intelligent and they make fantastic tools as well, you know. But the reality is you can't just rely on blockchain analytics alone. You have to use KYC. You can't just sidestep one part of the thing because you've got this, you know, this ultra visibility into user behavior. You need to combine that with an effective KYC program. And, you know, KYC is your first line of defense. You need to know what your customers are doing to see if the transactions that they're doing match with the type of category of customer you're dealing with. And I think that gets sometimes downplayed by companies, you know, in our space. But I'll say it clearly, you know, you need to have good KYC. Otherwise, there's no point to transaction monitoring. We just help you. We make it a lot better for you. We allow you potentially to detect people who are not being truthful on their KYC, but that's not a substitute. It's a complement. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I think that already. Go on.
Sorry. Yeah. I was just going to say, I think Nick said it right. It's a piece of the puzzle. And you need all the puzzle pieces to make to be effectively compliant. And I love blockchain analytics in the sense that they allow you to do a lot of things. Also improve the user experience of the user. So if the user comes along and pastes in a blockchain address, you can underwater query one of the providers you have, and then based on the answers, you can model your UI flow for that user. So it's an absolute integral part to a VASP business, and yeah, it's very useful in that sense.
I think with that, Nick, you answered already one question that I had for you, was what other aspects VASP must take into consideration when assessing the risks of transactions involving a self-hosted wallet. So KYC, anything else any of you would like to add to that?
I think one thing I'd like to tail onto that as well is it's called the risk-based approach for a reason when we talk about money laundering. And what that means is that no matter, you can't eliminate it at all. Like, you can't reduce the risk to zero. It's not physically possible. Like, there's always a criminal who's trying to beat you. Like, and they're always thinking of new sophisticated ways to set up front companies to launder transactions, to make abusive services that enhance privacy, like mixing services or coin joins. Like, there are always somebody trying to beat you. And as a result of that, the risk can never be zero. But we have an expectation as a media and a public for the risk, for you to never receive a transaction. I've repeated this quote several times, and I will make no shame of doing so. But it's from Graham Barrow from the Dark Money Files. And he says, if you speak to a compliance team and you say, okay, 3 to 5% of global GDP comes from illicit sources. And mapping that down, you can say that 3 to 5% of all deposits at a bank are from illicit sources. And most banks will go, yeah, fine, I accept that. Okay. And then if you say to them, well, 3 to 5% of your clients are criminals, they'll be like, no way, our KYC is bulletproof. And the reality is that something has to go wrong somewhere for this to happen. And the reality is it's an ongoing fight. It's not something that gets closed off. You buy a transaction monitoring tool, you do your KYC, and you reduce the risk significantly, and you have, legal obligations to serve that. But it never goes away. The key point is what you do when you find out something's wrong, and your ability to communicate that information to someone who can do something about it. Is it filing a suspicious transaction report? Is it freezing an account? Is it launching an internal investigation to discover what's happened? Like, what you do after you receive that information is what's critical. But as a public, we don't see that. We don't see the suspicious transaction reports filed by big exchanges when they have a deposit from a scam. We don't see them freezing people's accounts because we don't know about it. Again, that's their business, not ours. But it is happening. But I don't think the industry gets, the time and credit it deserves for what it does against these people.
Yeah, and I also think that to tack onto that, I think that you as a VASP are on the forefront of all this stuff. And frankly, I'm a big fan of the risk-based approach in all this stuff, because that means that the onus is on you to explain to the regulator when they come around what you were doing at this point, and that sets apart honest VASP and VASP who are just doing something. I think it's very important that as a compliance team, you sit down, think about this, and accept these realities, like Nick mentioned. You accept these realities that sometimes things go amiss, and you're doing the best you can, and you have reasons for doing certain things. For example, like we mentioned, you do proof of ownership for every transaction instead of, that's a story you can have to the regulator. Or if your FTX collapses, for example, I think that was one of our clients who gave that example. FTX collapses, all the people want to get their money out. You don't have time to KYC these people or whatever it is, and then you do business in a certain way, right? You also have a responsibility to the people to take that action. And I think the regulators are, in my limited experience there talking to these guys, they're quite receptive to these kind of stories. Just don't bullshit them.
Yeah, I agree. And
great,
I
great
think
advice.
it's never a good idea if you do.
No.
And I look at it too, is that this isn't a problem that's been solved by anybody. Like, again, a lot of the promise of cryptocurrency is, it's a better technology, but KYC and onboarding has been a problem for a long time. Crypto scandals tend to bury traditional financial scandals. We don't talk so much anymore about what happened with Danske Bank. We don't talk so much anymore what happened with Deutsche Bank or ING or any else. And we had billions of dollars being moved through, they called it the laundromat, like that's how bad it was. And these weren't useless companies. Like, these were big financial institutions. They had well-resourced, staffed compliance programs, qualified, trained people. They're not idiots who are doing this, but they're fighting against people who are very sophisticated. And it's we strive, in our industry, so between like what Crystal does, what our competitors do, what you guys at 21 Analytics do, we strive to reduce the amount of space that the criminals can use our platforms for. And because of the transparency, we do have a bit of an advantage because we can see the history of a payment and what's gone on in a transaction relationship. But that doesn't mean that the criminals haven't got all these other highly developed skills to try and get around us. Again, what we can do through what we have is, as you said, we can generate evidence and support what decisions we made and why. And I think it's a lot, because of the data that we can get, it's a lot clearer to see why a decision was reached with a cryptocurrency transaction, the back of the financial one, where it is a lot on, subjective knowledge of the investigator, their experience and what they understand. And whereas perhaps to try and unravel a multi-billion-dollar money laundering scheme, you need a tip-off for law enforcement with all the technical, investigative, and intelligence collection capabilities they have. With a cryptocurrency one, well, maybe you can just say, okay, this transaction has been through a mixing service. I don't know where it came from. I'm going to ask for some more information to do this, and now I'm going to block the transaction because I'm not happy about it. You can make the decisions more fairly.
And now with the proof of ownership requirements, this is also another step that you can use to prove, okay, I've done my bit. I have identified who owns this, and this is not in a.
But we should also understand what the limits of that are, right? As Nick just pointed out, proof of ownership is nice, because then that the VASP transferred money to this particular address, and that's owned by that particular user because you KYC it. There's of course if they go on do another transaction, then all the bets are off. So this also is not a magic bullet. This is part of this story you're going to have. You're going to tease all this information out of.
And maybe just to be more clear to everyone in the room, we have a question also about this, and I had prepped. So Pascal asks, how do you undertake proof of ownership? And I ask, what is your take on the ways that VASPs usually do proof of ownership?
Yes. Yeah, Nick, maybe you want to go.
I just want to chip in just quickly. We talked about screenshots earlier. I remember a case with a client where they had a split decision on a particular transaction from a client. So one of their customers had said to them, this address is mine, why have you blocked my money? And the exchange had used our product and detected that it was used for a drug market, like a vendor's purchase, like it's a big amount of money. And the guy came back and said, no, it's not, and then they took a video of them on another exchange's website and showed them with the address on there. And like, okay, look, this is all my stuff. And they refreshed the page and everything else to make it look convincing. The reality is that screenshots prove nothing. What we were able to do is even a video has proved nothing, because, you can technically go ahead and set up a local DNS and you can make it look like everything that's supposed to happen. And again, the criminals are sophisticated. They're not idiots. They know what they're doing. But the long story short is that's not proof of anything. And we were able to go through our records and find, the information that proved that cluster of addresses belonged to that particular drug marketplace, which allowed the exchange not to defend their position, but to take the position and reinforce it and not succumb to the client. But it's the limitations, I think, of this screenshot. Like, it bugs me because, we know that you can cheat in pictures. Like, Photoshop's been around for so long. And we think this is not going to be a problem because we've done that. I mean, I guess you guys could talk more about what the technical side is.
And just one point before, Harm, this relates back to exactly the question that Pascal brought. If this procedure should be made via a video conference call, a live call,
it's harder.
What do you think?
It's harder to fake.
Yeah.
So you see this escalation sometimes where a small amount of money and a screenshot is enough. If it's more, you need to do a video call with the compliance officer. But as Nick rightfully mentioned, I can fake everything of that. Especially if it's a larger amount of money, then the effort weighs up to the reward, right? We at 21 call this a visual proof, so it can either be a screenshot or anything else. And how that works is just the exchange asks you fill in a Bitcoin address. The exchange asks, okay, show us a screenshot where this Bitcoin address is shown, and then a compliance officer will look at it and say, this is right. And so that's expensive to do and completely, when I first heard about this, I was baffled. I was like, are you for real? I think there was even a screenshot generator floating around on the net where you just paste in a Bitcoin address and it will show you a wallet showing that Bitcoin address. It's of course trivial to do. But it is by far the most used method of doing so. If you do a video call, then it's a little bit harder, of course, and then you can escalate from that. Then you can go to a Satoshi test where the exchange will ask you to send a small amount of coins to a particular address, and then they whitelist the originating addresses. You can do manual proofs. So that means that so Bitcoin is nothing, or cryptocurrencies in general. You place with your private key, you place a signature somewhere, and then you send. Then you're basically signing a transaction and then doing the transfers. You can do this also with arbitrary messages. So the exchange will show you a message. They will ask you to generate a signature for this particular address, and then you submit it. I'm happy Lucas is on the call, because then you can laugh at both of us. We did this 2 weeks ago with a particular bank. I had a Trezor, and apparently there are 2 different types of signatures you can generate. I've been in this space for ages, and I was surprised. I think we did a pilot with one of our clients, and we saw 100% drop. Nobody got this right. This manual signing. And that's actually when we came up with this automatic proof ownership, where the user just clicks a button, the wallet opens up, click yes, and that's it. I think that's what I alluded to earlier in the call, where the market is maturing towards these solutions, and this is a bit of a tussle back and forth. True Bitcoiners, of course, don't like this, so wallets need to support this to take it out, and then there's a back and forth. But I think it's going to be inevitable in that sense, and that's all right. I think this is all right. We everybody on this call wants cryptocurrencies to grow big, and in order to do that, you are going to need the regulator for that. The regulator also sees this new field coming up. I had a chat with one of the oversight people, and they were like, just a little bit. There's this entirely new class of risk. They need to make sense of it. How is this going to impact everything? And I think we at 21 are in the business of like not only complying but also explaining what is possible. That's why I'm happy that we're having this frank discussion here. What is possible and what isn't possible? And we have this risk-based approach where you can at least have a good story, and let's all underscore the fact that you're never going to get to zero risk, and that's fine.
Yeah,
that's life.
I think it's another important point as well. So a question I get asked a lot is, what do you think of mixing services? What do you think about privacy enhancing cryptocurrencies or whatever else? And I mean, whereas I find it frustrating about privacy enhanced currencies, and we do see, maybe for a reporting bias, but we do see a lot of illicit and particularly violent extremist groups like migrating towards privacy enhancing cryptocurrencies, and also the abuse of mixing services by nation state threat groups like Lazarus Group from North Korea or whatever else. The reality is it comes back to your risk-based approach. Like, you can receive funds from a mixing service, and if your compliance policy says we're happy to receive funds from a mixing service, but if we do receive funds from a mixer, we need to have the following proofs of funds and everything else, all documentation, then that's fine. That's not a problem for you to do that. But in terms of the narrative around these things, everything is, oh, these are terrible, we can't deal with them. As a compliance team, you have to deal with this all the time. And there is a legitimate reason why somebody might want to use a mixing service. Like, it's not unheard of that people want to make them. They want to engage with it. And again, go back to my example of the map. Like, if there is if an unscrupulous blockchain analytics company goes on Twitter and starts harvesting addresses associated with Twitter handles because someone's tweeted this thing or they've got their NFT there, and now they start harvesting information and start collecting other data around that user, then I'm going to want to use a privacy tool to block that company from seeing what I'm doing. And that's perfectly fine. Like, people use Signal instead of WhatsApp because they want privacy. People use DuckDuckGo instead of Google because they don't want their search results being done. And we don't call these people criminals. We don't say this is only the purview of serious issues or whatever else. Mm-hmm. We just deal with that risk as it comes. And from a compliance team perspective, from a blockchain analytics one, if we see you sent money to us from a mixing service, okay, we might have that might be outside of our risk tolerance. We might say we don't deal with mixers because we're not happy with the proof that we'll get from it, and we think we can be defrauded too easily. But that doesn't mean everyone's going to have that same approach. And as long as you can justify it, it's fine. Go on, sorry, Hannah.
Sorry to stop you there, just because we are almost out of time. I think we've answered most questions. Yeah, and we have to wrap it up because we promised 15 to the hour we would close it. Thanks for everyone.
Have 45 minutes? That's a shame.
Yes. Usually we do 1 hour. This one should be shorter. Thanks for everyone tuning in. We hope we answered your questions. If you have any other question on self-hosted verification or blockchain analytics for Crystal, please reach out to us, Crystal or 21. We were very happy to welcome you here. Thanks for the speakers too. Great discussion.
Happy to be here.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, everyone.
All right. Good.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheerio.